this is a Google Forms session. Now, Google Forms does not exist in a vacuum. So this session is also going to get a little bit into Google Drive. It is also going to get a little bit into Google Classroom. It is also going to get into a little bit of data analysis. Like you kind of can't do these things all in a vacuum. So there's going to be all that stuff. So let's get started and let's take a look at what we're doing here. So this Google form that you're seeing, that you filled out, had 5 questions on it. And those 5 questions were in 5 different forms. Now, Google Forms is a tool that you can use to build these types of survey type, question and answer type experiences in flexible formats, okay? Because it's hard for everybody to know exactly what type of question you may need to ask. And that matters, okay? When you give an opportunity to gather feedback or input or information or something from your students, how you ask the question, or parents rather, how you ask the question really, really matters, okay? And we're finding this out in the era of COVID-19 for the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. We have been surveying our communities like crazy. I have received surveys as parents. I have written surveys as a PD person and somebody who provides and leads organizations. Like, there's a lot of surveys going out. And so what we've learned is that, this isn't something that we've learned. We already knew this. But like, the way you phrase a question matters. The way you bring, the way you craft the question and what type of response you get impacts the way that you can analyze the data and how much sense you can make. Now, if you're an elementary school teacher who's going to be working, generally speaking, with the same 20 to 30 kids, this is a little less, I mean, it's a little bit easier. You got a little more margin for error because the number of responses you're going to have is smaller. But if you're like an art teacher or somebody who's going to be working with like an entire building level, and so every time you post a Google form, you're going to get a couple hundred responses, then pre-thinking this stuff is of the highest importance because that's a lot of data. So, all right. So from my side of things, from the developer side of things, this is the Google form you filled out. And let's take a look at what it looks like, and then I'll show you how to get started, okay? But here's the 5 questions. Who is your, oh man, look at that, I already had a typo. Who is your favorite? I hope that you read that into that. Who's your favorite fictional person or character? The Battle of Fill in the Blank was one of the most decisive battles of the Civil War. Little social studies question for you. What are your beverage habits? Okay. I drink these things at these days of the week, or these times during the day, excuse me. I like to use Google Forms for, and then how comfortable are you with Google Forms? So you notice that those are 5 different question types. I'm actually more interested in showing you the question types than I am in any of the actual information at this point. So this one is a short answer constructed response. You guys could literally type everything, and every single one of you could choose a different answer. Okay. This one is a multiple choice question where you have to choose exactly one answer, and there's exactly one correct answer, and the other answers are definitely wrong. This is a grid question where you can choose multiple boxes for each grid. Okay, so if you are a milk drinker all the time and you don't care, I'll drink milk whenever, you could click all of those. But there's other types of, this format also has a radio button format where you would only be able to choose one time of day for each option. So we'll talk about those. This is a checkbox question that looks like multiple choice, but except you can choose multiple answers. And this is a scale question where you have to choose along a scale. Now let's take a look at what the data looks like. So there's 2 different ways to view the data. So the first one is every Google form you have is going to have a questions and a responses tab. Okay. So here are your responses. Now, with a I'm not fictional, guys. I'm real. Okay. I'm really here. Okay. It's not CGI. That's kind of funny. So with these, you notice that everybody could choose a different thing, but it is possible, because we understand that there are some people who are famous, like Harry Potter, that they may choose multiple things. So multiple people may choose them. So you see that there's a little bit of a graphical representation as well. Okay. This is one, I'm wondering if maybe this is the same person, except one person chose to put a last name and one person just chose a first name. That may not be true. Holden Caulfield. We got our Catcher in the Rye fan. No idea. That's also a fair answer. If you have a particular concern about people putting IDK, like if you got secondary kids, IDK is a real answer. So you may need to do a little classroom management on that one. Okay. Samwise Gamgee. Oh, I like Samwise. I liked him too when he played football for Notre Dame. And so that's what's going on there with the constructed response. These ones get to be kind of a mess if you have lots of responders because they can literally type anything and it has to match perfectly for it to catch it that it's been repeated. Okay. All right. The Battle of, a couple folks chose Jericho. I hope you were messing around. Jericho is, and then Waterloo. All right. Fair enough. Just, like I said, I maybe the same goofball that chose Andrew Shaver as a fictional character went ahead and chose Jericho as one of the most decisive battles of the Civil War. But I guess I assumed it was the American Civil War. Maybe you were referring to the Canaanite Civil War. Okay, maybe that's a cultural bias on my part. All right, so now we can get a look at this. The data on this is a little trickier because, as you notice, this is bivariate data. There's multi variables going on here. Okay, so we have a lot of people who drink coffee early morning, late morning. The coffee drinking kind of goes down as the day goes on. We would expect that, right? Decaf coffee, there are not a lot of decaf fans. I am personally a decaf fan, but I usually pick that up as starting in early afternoon. Got some fruit juice drinkers, people who don't mind some juice, and then we got some people who drink milk. What we don't know about this is whether or not these people are putting the milk in their coffee. Maybe they do drink milk, but they don't drink it plain. So that you could see that there's some opportunities to change that. Whole lot of water drinkers. What a healthy group we have. Excellent. Not a lot of juice drinkers because it's got a lot of sugar content, right? But boy, a whole lot of water. We drink water. Most of the time, I would imagine the nighttime water drinking stops because most people are sleeping and then they don't get as thirsty. But all right, we got some pop drinkers. We understand that is a thing people do. Get some tea drinkers, and then other, and we can only imagine what other. All right, and then Google Forms. Surveying parents and students is something that a lot of people chose. Exit tickets and quizzes, everyday use with common assignments, assignments with major tests and exams, and then other. Now you notice with other, that is a free response in that particular instance. So when you didn't choose one of the 5 choices I gave you, you could write your new response. So this person is very straight up saying, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be using this tool for. Thank you very much. I just got to this session. Teach me something and maybe I'll know how to answer this question better. Okay. And then this is what you would expect from an intro to Google Forms as well, is that you've got a lot of folks who are going to self-report that they're not very good at this, which is what they're doing here. It's why they self-selected to be at this session. Okay. All right. So this is what the data is going to look like. And it's fairly real-time-ish. I mean, you notice that most of you were taking that thing like, 10 minutes ago? And so it was filling that out in real time. One of the reasons I would caution you against using it in real time is that until somebody submits it, they can still go change their answers. So if somebody is, filling it out and then changes their mind and wants to go back and fix something up, you may not get a great read until they're actually done and they submit it. So keep that in mind. Now, another way that you can look at the data is by clicking this green button here. Okay. Now, this green button is going to change this data from this graphical format into a spreadsheet format. Okay. So when you click that, it's going to say, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to create a new spreadsheet? And it already gives you a name. You can free type in that if you want to change the name, by the way. Or you can choose an existing spreadsheet. So if you are super ambitious and you want to push all this data to the same spreadsheet, you can do that. I haven't messed much with that, and that's been an option for a decade now. And I haven't played around too much with it because I haven't found much need to do it. So, but that's there. So when you create the new spreadsheet, and then you click open down here, and it brings that spreadsheet up. And it's going to be a Google spreadsheet that's going to show you the data in a spreadsheet format rather than a graphical format. And depending on what it is you're after, it's possible that you're going to do something that has some numerical analysis and you want to be able to do your spreadsheet work, finding some averages or compiling some of that. This gives you a different look, and depending on what you're after. Plus, it includes the timestamp, so it shows when these things were submitted. Okay, so when I sent you to go do it at 10:03, like most of you went in there and had the thing submitted by 10:05. So that's your basic, like, here's what you may want to do with Google Forms kind of introduction. So let me go show you from the very, very beginning how to start this, okay? I want to give you a vision of where I'm taking you, and then I'm going to show you how to start this, okay? So in your Google Drive, okay, this is where you will begin. Now, there's a shortcut way to do this, and I'll show you that in a second, but let's start from the very, very beginning. So when you go to Google Drive, which is drive.google.com, that will take you to your Google Drive. Now, what you'll do is you'll look for this new button here. So when you click new, you notice that this is where all of your Google apps live that you could create from scratch. Google Docs is one of them. That's like the Microsoft Word. That's like a word processing document. Google Sheets is one. That's a spreadsheet tool. Google Slides is one. That's a slideshow tool, sort of like PowerPoint. And then you'll click down here to more, and you'll get all sorts of other stuff. And one of those other stuffs is Google Forms. And it brings up this blank form with one question that's got nothing on it. It's got no title. It's got nothing. It's blank. This is starting from scratch. Okay. Now, there's another way that you can get that. If you're in a super big hurry and you open up a new tab and you type in forms.new like this and hit enter, forms.new and hit enter, it will auto-generate a brand new Google form in your Google Drive. Okay, the reason I would be hesitant to use this all the time is that there's no organization to it. It's just going to drop that Google form wherever in your Google Drive. Like, it's just going to put it on the front page of your Google Drive. So you may have an organizational structure, like you're going to say, I want all of my Google Forms to live in this folder, at which point then you'd have to go in the folder and create it. But that's okay. Okay, so here's your new Google form. Okay, so up here is where you'll put the title. Okay, you would put a way better title than that, by the way. That's really not a good title, but you do a better job. Okay, now when you do that, that will change this title here to the title that you put here. Okay, so that'll help. And that's one of the reasons you're going to want to give a better title than that, because you may give lots of quizzes. So maybe this is Math 8, Quiz 1, or something like that. Down here in form description, you can include either a descriptor or instructions. So here is where you'll start actually populating the questions. Okay, now there's a couple different things that you're going to want to do. The first thing is you're going to want to think about what the experience is that the students are going to have in the Google form. Okay, and by that I mean you can build this thing out. It's a fairly flexible tool. So if you just want to ask questions like the way I did, that's fine. You can do that. But you can also embed videos and pictures, like say, hey, look at this picture, and then respond to this picture. Or you could include a short reading, and say, hey, this is, please read this work, and then answer these questions about it, or respond to these questions about it. Okay, so first of all, you've got to kind of consider what the experience is that you want the students to have in your Google form. Okay, because the better a vision you have for it, the better chance you're going to have that you create a Google Forms that does what you need it to do. And I want to insist on that point, that the form does what you need it to do. Okay, I don't know how many of you have had the experience of giving a survey that doesn't end up giving you the answers that you want. or asking a quiz questions where by the time the students all turn in their quizzes, you're not actually that clear on whether they really know what you want them to know because you ask bad questions. Okay, that's possible to do. It's possible to do in Google Forms too. So have a good vision for what it is you're hoping. Let's take a look actually over here at all the different options you have. So it's going to default to thinking that you want to ask a multiple choice question. Okay, you may want to ask a multiple choice question. You may not. You may always want to start with what is your name? Might not be a bad starting spot. Okay. Now there's reasons you don't need to ask that question, but you may not, but that would be a short answer question because all they would be doing is typing in your name. And that's the same as on this form when I said, who's your favorite fictional person or character? Okay. That's a short answer question. And you saw what that looked like is just provide this little spot and you just type whatever you want in there. Okay. But these other questions, question types allow you to ask different things. Okay. So a paragraph answer would be a longer answer. So instead of what is your name, perhaps it's describe one fun or interesting thing that happened over the summer. Okay, that would be a longer answer. That would be a paragraph. You'd need several sentences to answer that question. Okay, so the next one down would be your multiple choice options. So with multiple choice options, you've got a radio button option, which basically means that there is one, you want each person to choose exactly one answer. So you would say, if you chose that one, perhaps the question is, who is your favorite teacher? Question mark. Mrs. Powell. And then you would click down here and add option, and it would give you a second line. Mr. Davis. Ms. Clark. And then you could click add other, and your fourth choice would be other. Okay, but if you wanted to keep adding options, all of the above, okay, you could just keep adding options. Okay, and I think there is a limit, but most times you're not going to reach it. Okay, so this is the multiple choice issue. Now, if you want to change that to checkboxes, you can. And the difference between a proper multiple choice and checkboxes is that in a multiple choice question, the responders can choose exactly one thing. And in a checkbox question, they can choose as many of the things as they want. So there would be no need to add all of the above to a checkbox question because they could just click them all. Let's see. Can you create a quiz and give different values or points? Yes, you absolutely can. So we'll talk a little bit about the grading piece here in a second. So, okay, so the drop-down menu is the same idea, except the drop-down is a multiple choice. They can choose exactly one option. But with a drop-down, it changes the way it looks. So, all right, watch this here. I'm going to click on something. I want to show you what it does. So up here, in these options here, one of those options is preview. You see that little eyeball? That's the preview button. So anytime you click that, it's going to show you what the students will see when they open up the quiz. Okay, so that's what they would see. So with this particular option, it's built out like a drop-down as opposed to showing all the lists. So this is the drop-down here, and they would choose one. Or if you switch this to multiple choice and preview it, it looks like a multiple choice question. They function exactly the same way. That's a stylistic difference. Generally speaking, you use a drop down if the list is longer. So if you have let's suppose that you're asking them something. Raleigh is the capital of which state, and you really want to put all the states in there. you would probably want to use a drop-down menu as opposed to just listing all 50 states in a single list that is visible, because that's going to make for a lot of scrolling. Okay, so that's the difference there. So they break that into sections. So you got your free response section here, whether you want it to be a short free response or a long free response. You've got your multiple choice type options here, whether you want that to be a multiple choice looking like options on the list, whether you want it to look like a drop down menu that they have to click on to populate the list, or whether you want them to do checkboxes so they can choose multiple answers. Okay. Now this next one down is file upload. Now pay attention. This one's a little risky, and I don't mean that cheeky. Like, this one's a little risky because files will be uploaded from the form owners or to the form owner's Google Drive. So whatever your responders upload will go into your Google Drive. Okay? So keep that in mind, because they don't have to upload what you want them to upload. They can upload anything as long as it's under the size. Okay? Respondents will be required to sign into Google. When the file upload questions are added to the form, make sure to only share this with people you trust, because they could upload pictures that you don't want to see. They could upload viruses if you think you've got kids that are capable and you suspect they may do that. So do keep in mind when you move into the file upload section that you're opening the door to a little bit more risk than you otherwise would be. Okay? But when you choose that, when you click continue on that, you'll type the question, upload a photo of a bird outside where you live. Okay, then they would take the photo and they would upload it. Now, the maximum, you get to set what types of file types you want. So if you say it has to be an image, that'll make it so it has to be an image. So it'll be a JPEG or a PNG or something like that. You could make it so that it's a doc. This is a new feature, by the way. This is new in the last couple weeks. Okay, spreadsheets, PDFs. So you can specify the file type that you're accepting. You can specify the number of files that you're accepting so that it will not. So if you need more than one file, like if you want multiple pictures, and then you can also do the maximum file size. Okay. Now I would stick to smaller on this one, particularly if you have more respondents, but that's what's going on there. Okay. All right. Now, these are your linear scales. So with this one, this linear scale question is similar to this question here, where you can set your scale, you set your low spot, you set your high spot like this, and then you can actually write, that's what you can free write whatever goes in there. So if it's an I, completely disagree, completely agree kind of thing, or you could say cold and hot, or you could say, really dislike, really like. I mean, you could change that, but, and then the question up here was the question you want the students to respond to. So you would say something like, how much do you enjoy oatmeal? I don't know. I don't know why you'd ask that question, but you see what I'm saying. So the question goes up here. This is your rating system. Do you want to start at 0? Do you want to start at 1? And then do you want to go all the way up to 10, or what's your scale? Okay. So that's up to you. You can free respond that. The multiple choice grid, it can be similar to that. Okay. So you could say it just shows up in grid format. So if you have multiple questions and you want to use the same rating system, so perhaps it's still really dislike, neutral, and then really like. Okay, how much do you enjoy? And down here you could add the different foods: oatmeal, pizza, tomato soup. roast beef. I don't know. Anyway, so then once again, so now you've got this same type of structure in place, but you've got multiple choice, like multiple questions aligned to that same scale. So once again, you click on this eyeball and you can see what it looks like. So now it creates this grid structure where the students or whoever would have to go through each option and choose just one of the choices for this. Okay. Now, likewise with this, you may choose a checkbox grid, which will keep the question the same, but we'll change them to checkboxes so that people can choose multiple choices, which is what I did here with this question. So with this question, I knew that it's possible that our coffee drinkers, our hardcore coffee drinkers, perhaps don't just choose caffeinated coffee at one spot in the day. If they're up in the early morning, they're drinking coffee. But if maybe they like to have another cup after lunch or whatever. So it's those kinds of things where based on the type of question, I may choose checkboxes here so they can click just any of the boxes that they want as many times as they want. Or maybe I choose radio buttons because maybe instead of what are your beverage habits, maybe I would say what is the most likely time that you would consume one of these beverages, at which point I would want them to declare a choice. Oh, I'm most likely to drink coffee at 6 a.m. So that would, you know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. Okay. So those are your basic types of questions. Now, these are if you have specific types of things that you want, which is, this is the data validation piece. This is sort of second level stuff. If you want a date or if you want a time, you can choose that. So, what is your birthday? Don't ever ask that question. That's a terrible question to ask because you're asking students to verify personal information. You're training them to type that into a random form. So don't do that. But that's the type of thing where it's like, I would want the students to actually declare an actual date, a month, a date, and a year. And then the time, would be if you've got something like, when will you be, or what, how about what is the easiest time for you to drop by the school? Okay, and then they would actually need to, they couldn't type noon. They'd have to like type 3:30 p.m. or something like that. Okay, so those are all your different input, sort of data input types. These are the things we can craft questions to gain student or community input. Now, each one of these things has some options here. So you can choose, like if you're concerned perhaps that they're not going to understand what you're really asking, you can add a description to these and type in like an explanation. Because we may need to exchange, exchange materials. Okay, so you may, if you feel like maybe you need to add that, if you click those little 3 dots down there, that will give you an option to add that. Another thing is response validation. So if you're like, let me give you an example. Let's suppose you needed to write, maybe you're pushing this thing out to the community, okay, and you can't be convinced they all have Google accounts. So maybe you ask, what is your email address? Okay, and if somebody types in, B Rogers at gmail.com, they make a typo and they forget to put the dot in there, and now you've got a bunch of things, and some of them have bad data in them. You can't email brogers at gmail.com. You could email brogers at gmail.com, but now you're stuck going through every single one of those responses to make sure that the dot is in all of those things, right? And as it sits, or Gmail dot, this one's fairly common because people get to typing fast. They'll write GOPM because their finger hits both the O and the P on the keyboard, right? It's that kind of stuff where, like, if you click on that response validation, you can say down here that your answer is going to be text that is an email address. Okay. And then this question will only accept an email address. And you can even write in here a custom error message so that if they haven't written an email address, you can say, whoops, please put a full valid email address, please. Okay. And then once again, that little eyeball will show you what it looks like. So you click on that eyeball, and then maybe in here you write, what is your email address? But some goofball reads it and misreads it. And so they write Andrew. If they try and submit that, it's going to pop up that error message. Whoops, please put a valid email address, please. And you can change what that says. So if maybe you're not that polite and you just say, hey, read the question. Well, you could do that if you wanted to. It'll update that. Reload. And then you type Andrew. And it says, hey, read the question. So, I mean, if you, those are things situational. I wouldn't do that with a community thing, but like, hey, if you're having fun with your coworkers. But anyway. Okay. So this is, I mean, so that's the basics of like creating the thing. Okay. Okay. So hold on. Question just came into the chat. I assume once a form is created, it can be used again each year. Do the responses, answers stay until deleted? Yeah. So once you generate a form, that data is going to stick around there for as long as you want it to stick around there. Okay. You could copy and paste it over into a new form to keep it. If you want to reuse a form, you have a couple different ways you could do that. Sort of the first question is, do you want the new data all playing in with the old data? Okay, so if it's a community response thing and you want fresh data each time, then I would go up here when you're in the form and make a copy. And then it'll take that whole form exactly as it exists and just make a fresh copy of it. So that then you can issue that form again and get the same data back, but it's a fresh take of the data. So that's one way you can do it. If, because of the way that you're analyzing the data, you want the data to all sit in the same spreadsheet because of the way you're analyzing it, then yes, you could just go up there and give this form again. And all the data that was previously there will stay, and all the new data will come in. And on the spreadsheet, that's actually not that big of a deal because you get that timestamp. So you'll see all the time-stamped answers came in last year, and then a whole chunk of data that sits underneath that, lower on the spreadsheet, will say timestamp this year. So that's up to you. Yes, you can do that. How do you reuse a daily form like a check-in form? Okay, great question. So let's suppose that this is a check-in form. Okay, so and there's a lot of good reasons to do this, particularly in a virtual setting. So maybe you would say, what schoolwork did you do last night? Question mark. And then we'd add a question. We wouldn't want to do the response validation, but we'll get back there to that one. And you'd say, what was the difficulty level? And maybe that's a linear scale from 0 to 5, really difficult, super easy. And then maybe what is your stress level? And maybe you would say mellow and relaxed. And we would say really stressed out. Okay. All right. So maybe you want to give this thing every single morning. Okay. Now, once again, the first question is, do you want that data to all be on the same chunk of data, or do you want a separated set of data for each day? That's a you question, because you could do this either way. So when you go to send this thing, first things first, we'll go up here to settings. And you'll need to decide who's taking this thing. For me, I almost always uncheck this box because if I just limit this to ISD people, then most people can't take it because most of you don't work in the ISD. So I uncheck that box, but that might be something where you want to make sure that the only people who are taking this thing are Lansing school students or East Lansing students or whoever. Okay. Now, once you save that, you'd click send, and this little link button here is what you would post. So this is what you would put in your Google Classroom. So you would copy that. You'd go over to your Google Classroom. You'd create an assignment. You'd add the, oops, not that one, excuse me. You'd add the link here. And you'd say daily check-in form, July 29th, 2020. Okay. And then you hit assign. And there it is. It's done. Okay. So now when the students get there, they'd click on the form and it would take them to the form. Okay. So depending on how you want to handle that, if you wanted to add, I know I went through that super fast. Yes, I sure did. Because once again, I want to make sure I'm running a little shy on time. So, but depending on, I will definitely reshow all of that. Definitely. So, depending on how you want to handle what that data looks like, you may look at this and say, okay, this is the daily check-in for July 29th, 2020. Tomorrow on July 30th, I'm going to post a new one. So I'm going to make a copy of this. And then I'm going to call this one daily check-in July 30th, 2020. And then I'll hit OK. And now I've got that same exact form. It's just got the new name. And I would have to just go up there and update the date. And then once again, I would go to send. I click over on the link because this is if you're sending it to people's email addresses. So that's this first one. You see a little email mark. But over here on the link, then you could, I mean, if you wanted to, you could post a little bit of a shorter URL. But if you're just copying and pasting it, it's up to you. Okay. And then you would hit copy. And then once again, over in your Google Classroom page, go over to classwork. And then you create a new assignment. And you'd add a link. And you would just take that URL, that link that you copied, and paste it right in there. And then this becomes daily check-in July 30th. And then here's a little secret, little pro tip. You ready? If you haven't used Google Classroom a bunch, rather than clicking assign on this one, click that little arrow next to it and click schedule. And then tell Google Classroom that you don't, because this is the July 30 check-in. Tell Google Classroom that you don't want that thing coming up until 8 o'clock on the 30th so that your students don't even see the 30th check-in until tomorrow on the 30th. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about making one of these a quiz, okay? Because you may find that there's some value in like having this thing graded, do a little bit of self-grading and stuff like that. Okay, so when you click on the settings right here, your little gear, and remember, for all things in Google, when you see that little gear, that's your settings. Okay, that's true in Google Classroom. It's true in all Googly things. So when you see that little gear, those are your settings. Now, over here, you've got a couple of different ways that you can arrange for this form to be used. So presentation means Presentation doesn't mean, hey, I'm going to present this thing. Presentation means, what is it going to look like to the people who see it? So do you want to show a progress bar? Like maybe you've got a really long quiz and you want to make sure that the students don't get burned out, and so that they have some sense of how much further they have to go. Okay, so you may show a progress bar. If it's just a one-page quiz with or a one-page form with like 5 or 6 questions on it, then there's no sense doing a progress bar. But if you've got multiple pages and it's more robust, 20 questions or something, you may choose that. Shuffling the question order is one way, so that the person earlier who asked about, can you do multiple forms, you can shuffle the question order so that every time it gets opened up, it has a fresh question order. Okay, that's one way you can do it. And then show link to submit another response. So that is, once you submit the form, it'll say, would you like to do this again? And you noticed on mine, so for the Google form that I used for you at the beginning, that was there. Okay, so when you went to go take that form, it says submit another response. If I would have unchecked that box, that link would not have shown up. And it's possible for your quizzes, you don't want that link to show up. Okay. Another thing you may choose to mess with is this: your response has been recorded. It's possible you want your students to have another instruction there. Great. I'll let you know how it goes. Next, head over to, I don't know, www. Okay, maybe you want to give an instruction there. And so I would hit save here. And then when I go to fill that form out, it's got more instructions here. It's changed what that says. So now the students have a link here to click. Okay, so it's possible, and I've done this before, that you want the students to take the quiz and then head over to a reading so that there's automatically something for them to go do once they're done. That's a little bit more meaningful in an asynchronous setting than an asynchronous setting, but that's up to you. Okay, so now let's take a look at the quiz, the quiz style for this thing, okay? So when you go over to the quizzes, first of all, you have to decide, are you gonna make this quiz or not, okay? Now you can turn on locked mode for Chromebooks, but it only works on Chromebooks. So if your students are gonna be taking this thing on a phone or on a laptop or on a Mac or on an iPad or anything else, I would not use locked mode. Okay, that works better in a setting where you're in a classroom with a cart, you know, everybody's using the same device and all that stuff. Okay. The question of when do you want to release the grade, meaning when are the students going to see how they did on it? Okay. Now, if it's a simple thing and you know the answers, then you can choose immediately if that's up to you. Like if you want them to have feedback right away as far as how they did. If you want it to be later so that you can review all the information before they see how they did, that's up to you too. So that's an option that you have. And then what is it that they get to see as far as when you release the grade, what is it that they'll see? Okay. Now I found a really cool video to this that I will post at the end. This is really good and it's short. It's like less than 5 minutes. That goes through the entire process in terms of Google Classroom and the interactions between the quizzes and all that other stuff. Okay. But if you set this as a quiz, yes, save. So you notice this stuff kind of changes. So now you have this answer key button. Okay. So you could type in a correct answer. So for the record, the correct answer for who your favorite fictional person is is, I don't know, Dr. Gregory House. I don't know if that's right or wrong. I don't know. But you could type in multiple correct answers. So we would have also accepted Wonder Woman. And we would have also accepted SpongeBob SquarePants. Okay. Mark all other answers incorrect. And then you can give feedback. Okay. And that's going to be true for all of these. So you could set an answer key. So which one of these is the correct answer? Gettysburg is the correct answer. And I want that to be a 2-point question. Okay. And then you could add feedback. So you'd have to go through here and tell it how many points each question is worth. You have to tell it what the right answer is and what it should do with the wrong answers. Okay. And so now it's tabulating up here how many points this thing is going to be worth. And then when the students take this, they will engage it like they would engage a normal quiz. Now, so you have to put in the correct answer. That's correct. So if Google Forms doesn't know what a right answer is, it can't grade it. So you have to then, for each one of these, if you want it to do some auto grading, you have to tell it what you want the right answer to be. So another thing, these are just simple things right now, but like you could customize the theme. Like if you don't like that purple color, like it's going to default to that purple color because the color that Google has assigned to Google Forms is purple. But you could change that if you would prefer it to be a different color. That's totally up to you. And then you could even, there's even like pretty pictures that you can choose too. So if you're like, oh, jelly beans, I prefer jelly beans, then that'll change. That'll give you a jelly beans picture. So it's like some of that stuff, depending on the what you're trying to do with your form, you may choose some of that stuff.